During World War II, the Dutch East Indies were a rich source of oil, making it a likely target for the ever-so-expanding Empire of Japan. Part of the East Indies were controlled by the British, but most of it was in the hands of the Netherlands. The stationed forces here were known as the Koninklijk Nederlands Indisch Leger, KNIL for short. Fearing coming under attack from Japan, preparations were made by the officials to make a declaration of war that would later be described as self-defense by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. On 8 December, the Netherlands declared war on Japan, mere hours before news of Pearl Harbor had reached the Dutch government in London. It would have to be a war fought by the KNIL alone, as their home country in Europe had surrendered to Germany a year earlier. Some of the Indonesians saw the Japanese as their savior, freeing them from the binding shackles of colonization by the Dutch. Others merely saw it as an exchange from an old oppressor to a new one. Heavy battles followed at sea between the Dutch and British Royal Navy and the Japanese incoming fleet. Though the Allies managed to destroy several high-priority ships, the colossal scale and approach of the Japanese invasion force was undiminished. The Japanese would first arrive at Borneo at the British coast. Knowing that the units stationed there were far too few to fight back, the Japanese took this part with almost no resistance. Their next target would be a nearby airfield that was controlled by the Dutch. The Dutch Air Force was able to do some damage to the fleet with the planes stationed here, but the airfield lacked any heavy weaponry to defend itself. It would be up to the infantry to fend off the invader. But the Japanese had way higher numbers and even some light armor at their side. Getting across the beach was no problem as the Dutch only possessed a handful of mortars. The Dutch were spread out thin, but fired back with the limited resources they had. Japanese artillery vanquished some of the Dutch machine gun nests in mere seconds, paving a path for their infantry. The Dutch mortars were able to take some of the Japanese soldiers out, but they started to spread out once reaching the airfield, making them difficult to hit. The armor started to roll in as well, and tried to attack at the flank. The Dutch lost many of their troops as they did not have the force to deal with the Japanese. Their own buildings were used by the enemy as cover as they lost their final mortar crew desperately trying to hold on. The Japanese armor had broken through the Dutch lines as well, and an order of retreat was given. The Dutch soldiers took cover behind the buildings and barricades as they slowly moved back while covering each other. The remaining machine gun nests played an essential part as they provided the most effective covering fire as many fell back. But even the MG nests could do nothing against the explosive weapons and grenadiers of the Japanese. They had now spread all across the area and had several remaining Dutch soldiers pinned down, unable to flee. Those who were able to flee ran for the hills and jungle, intending to link up with the rest of their army at several other airfields and camps. And then when the final Dutchman was taken out, the airfield was officially under Japanese control. Borneo would function as a ground for 3 labor camps in the years to follow, holding thousands of POWs and civilians. At the worst camp, 6 out of 2,500 prisoners survived. Not too long after the attack had commenced, word was going around of preparations to create a combined Allied command between America, Britain, Holland, and Australia. It would take several more days before the command known as APDICOM would show its face. Though the invasion had begun, the fight was long from over.